Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a closer look at a single research paper, and it reveals something, well, pretty surprising about the, let's say, the social structure of science. We often think of biology research as purely driven by curiosity, maybe global collaboration.
Meritocracy, right?
Exactly. But what is the actual animal you study? What if that shapes your whole career? And who gets to be in charge? So we're diving into a 2025 paper. It's by Laura Tenson and Peter R. Teskey. The title is Research Monopolization in the Biological Sciences. Charismatic Species Are Partly to Blame. Our mission today is really to unpack what they found about how choosing these, charismatic species, the big impressive ones, actually makes existing social divides and exclusion worse in academia.
It's a really strong argument they're making, and it builds on something we already know exists in sociology. Tenson and Teskey start by saying, look, research excellence isn't spread evenly, it's often concentrated.
Right. Elite institutions, more resources.
Precisely. And that creates what sociologists call cumulative advantage. You might know it as the Matthew effect.
The rich get richer. Simple as that.
Pretty much. Influence attracts more influence. Established players tend to consolidate resources, consolidate power. And this paper asks, well, what happens when that key resource isn't just lab equipment or funding, but a specific type of animal?
Okay, so let's nail that down. What exactly is a charismatic species as they define it here?
Kim, the paper defines it based on how humans see them. So typically large, maybe beautiful, definitely impressive animals. Think elephants, whales, big cats like lions.
Okay.
And they contrast that with, say, a rat or a crab. Those would be non-charismatic in this context.
Got it. So the big, the furry, the famous.
Basically. And the pull for researchers is huge. If you choose to study one of these charismatic species, well, it can really boost your visibility. We're talking better chances at funding, higher success, publishing in those top-tier journals, more media attention.
Makes sense. People are just more interested.
And critically for conservation, it drives up the public's willingness to pay to protect them. They're flagships. Scientific flagships.
So it sounds like a golden ticket, academically speaking. But Tenson and Teskey found a dark side to this, didn't they? Where there's high demand.
There's fierce competition.
Yeah.
Exactly. And when everyone wants to study the lions or the whales, that competition can turn, well, nasty. The authors report it leads to some pretty negative actions. Things like researchers being less willing to share samples.
Okay, that's maybe expected.
But it gets worse. They mention things like actively sabotaging one's competitor's work.
Wow.
Or even stealing creative ideas, really undermining colleagues.
That's not just competition anymore. That's hostility.
Yeah.
So how did they actually prove this link between the species' charisma and this kind of academic exclusion? It seems like a tough thing to measure.
They used a really clever mixed methods approach, which I think is a strength of the paper. They didn't just rely on one type of evidence. They combined, the hard, objective publication data with people's actual subjective experiences.
Okay, break that down. What was the hard data side?
That was a big bibliometric analysis. They looked at 800 scientific papers published between 2013 and 2023. Half on charismatic species, half on non-charismatic.
Right.
And they analyzed key metrics for prestige, like the journal impact factor, the IF, which shows how influential the journal is, and the number of citations NOC for each specific paper, showing its individual impact.
Standard stuff for measuring academic success.
Exactly. But they also looked deeper at co-authorship networks, where the institutions were based geographically, and they even tried to assess the sex and race of the authors, usually based on photos or names, to see if there were demographic biases in who gets published where.
That's quite detailed. And what was the other part, the subjective experiences?
That came from an anonymous online survey. They got responses from over 800 scientists, 826 to be exact, across 90 different countries.
Anonymous, so people could speak freely.
Crucial. This let them capture things the publication record just wouldn't show. People reported on experiences with, social dominance, feeling excluded, actual research monopolization. And they linked these experiences to their academic status, their social group, and, importantly, whether they studied charismatic species or not.
Okay, so a really comprehensive approach, combining the big picture data with individual stories. So after all that, what did they find? Does studying a charismatic species actually pay off in terms of prestige?
The short answer is yes. The core finding holds up. They found a significant positive correlation. Higher species charisma was linked to both higher journal impact factor, IFF, and more citations.
NLC. So charisma equals academic success, basically.
And also more international collaboration, more authors, more countries involved.
I remember reading a really interesting nuance here. It wasn't all charismatic species that got this boost, was it?
You're absolutely right. That's a critical point. This whole benefit, the higher IF, the higher NOC it was, and I quote, entirely due to the charismatic mammals.
Mammals specifically, not, say, a charismatic eagle or a great white shark.
Apparently not. When they compared charismatic non-mammals to the non-charismatic species, they found no significant difference in those prestige metrics.
Wow. Sounds specific. Why do you think that is? Just that mammals are cuter, fuzzier.
It really suggests it's about cultural resonance, doesn't it? Our inherent bias towards certain types of animals. We seem to value charismatic mammals above all else, even within the charismatic category.
Which means science is essentially rewarding researchers for picking the species we find most appealing.
Yeah.
That's a bit uncomfortable, scientifically speaking.
It really is. And this focus on mammals also ties into the collaboration findings.
Right, you said more collaboration for charismatic species.
Right.
But the paper pointed out that these collaborations weren't always equal partnerships, let's say.
Exactly. Collaborations were much more common and complex for charismatic mammals. More authors, more institutions, more countries involved. That part's true. But they found that institutions from non-native countries, so outside the species' natural habitat, were way more involved in charismatic species research.
How much more involved?
About 39% of institutions involved were from non-native countries for charismatic species, compared to just 20% for non-charismatic ones.
Okay, and where were these non-native institutions coming from? And where were they studying?
This is where it gets really stark. It was predominantly researchers from universities in North America and Europe.
Right, the global north.
And they were primarily studying charismatic species located in Africa, South America, and Asia.
Ah, so a one-way street, essentially.
Pretty much. The paper states it was hardly ever the other way around. Researchers from the species' home regions weren't typically leading projects based in Europe or North America.
So the intellectual leadership, the funding, the control, stayed largely with Western institutions, even when studying biodiversity hotspots elsewhere.
That's what the data suggests. Local institutions in Africa, Asia, South America were often involved, perhaps providing access or samples, but less often in those senior corresponding author positions.
Only Australia showed a balance, they said.
Yes, Australia seemed to be an exception with more reciprocal collaborations.
That really paints a picture of, well, academic colonialism, almost.
Yeah.
Monopolizing not just the species, but the narrative around them.
It certainly points towards deep structural imbalances. And these imbalances, combined with the fierce competition, seem to have real negative consequences for individual researchers.
Let's get into those survey results then. The personal impact, you said it was significant.
It's quite shocking, actually. A full 46%, almost half of the survey respondents who worked on charismatic species, reported experiencing research monopolization.
Nearly half.
Yeah.
That's not just a few bad apples. That suggests a systemic issue in those fields.
It really does. It's widespread.
What did that monopolization look like in practice? What were people reporting?
They asked about specific negative actions. The most commonly agreed upon statements were things like, other researchers provided unreasonably negative reviews on my scientific output.
Ah, weaponizing peer review.
Exactly. That was reported by 10% of respondents overall, and 9% reported that someone stole my research idea or intellectual output.
Actual theft?
Yes. And other examples included senior researchers insisting on authorship without contributing significantly, or people being unexpectedly removed from the author list just before publication, things that can derail a career.
And did this link back to social groups? You mentioned the bibliometric analysis looked at author demographics.
It did, and the link is clear. First, the overall picture showed a skew across all papers they looked at. 69% of first authors were men and 81% of last authors were men.
Okay, a definite gender bias, especially in senior roles.
And racially, 69% of first authors and 76% of last authors were identified as Caucasian. So a baseline bias exists across the board.
But what about specifically for the charismatic species papers? Did it get worse?
This is the crucial finding regarding career progression. On papers about charismatic species, Non-Caucasians and women were significantly more likely to be the first author.
Okay, the person doing the bulk of the work, often a junior researcher or student,
Exactly, but they were significantly less likely to be the last author.
which is typically the senior position, right? The lab head, the one who got the grant, the corresponding author who directs the research.
Precisely. It's the position that really builds long-term academic power and shapes the field. So the findings suggest that women and non-Caucasian researchers are doing the labor in these high-profile fields.
But are being systematically excluded from the leadership roles. They get credit for the work, maybe, but not the ultimate controller status.
That's the implication. And the survey data backs this up by showing the types of unfair treatment people face.
What did that show?
Overall, 26% of respondents felt they'd been treated unfairly due to their social group. The main reasons cited were sex, that accounted for 32% of the discrimination claims, and limited work experience at 27%.
Okay, so gender and seniority are major factors.
Yes. And interestingly, the type of discrimination often differed by gender. Women more frequently reported being denied collaboration opportunities or being actively discouraged from writing research proposals.
So structural barriers preventing them from even starting projects or advancing?
Exactly. Whereas men, interestingly, more often reported having their intellectual output stolen.
Different tactics, same result of exclusion or disadvantage. You mentioned someone described these groups as having a mafia-like structure.
Yes, that was a quote from a respondent, illustrating this feeling of tight-knit in-groups that support their own members but actively exclude outsiders. It paints a picture of a potentially toxic environment.
It really suggests that older, established, often white male researchers dominate these high-prestige, resource-rich fields.
And that women in particular face significant structural inequalities, maybe even harassment, that hinder their ability to stay and progress in these fields, leading to career setbacks or forcing them out entirely.
Okay, so let's pull back. What's the bigger picture here? This so what? If studying cool animals leads to this kind of environment, what are the broader consequences for science and conservation?
The paper argues there are two massive impacts. First, this focus on charismatic species leads to neglected biodiversity.
Right, all the less glamorous species.
The insects, the fungi, the weird little fish, they desperately need research and conservation too, but they don't attract the same prestige or funding, so they get overlooked.
That's a huge problem for conservation overall.
Definitely. And the second major impact is that this whole system deepens that cumulative advantage gap. It creates what the authors call epistemic inequality.
Meaning inequality in who gets to create knowledge.
Exactly. It widens the gap between elite and less resourced institutions and between different demographic groups. We end up potentially missing out on crucial talent and diverse perspectives needed to tackle global challenges.
So how do we even begin to fix something like this? It seems baked into both human nature, our attraction to certain animals, and the very structure of academic rewards.
Well, Tenson and Tesker propose some concrete systemic changes. A big one is challenging our reliance on those traditional metrics.
Like impact factor and citation counts.
Exactly. They argue we need to reduce how much weight we give them. If the main rewards driving this behavior are tied to IF and NOC, then maybe we need to change the rewards.
Shift the incentive structure.
Yeah.
What would we evaluate instead?
They suggest looking at wider non-academic impacts, things like engagement with the public through news articles, work with local communities, contributions to academic debates that might not result in high citations immediately, broader societal relevance.
Okay, that makes sense. Diversify what counts as impact.
And crucially, they call for stronger corrective systems for scientific misconduct. They say institutions, universities, research institutes, maybe via their DEI committees and codes of conduct and journals themselves, need to take much more responsibility.
So, enforcing standards and creating mechanisms to address bias, theft, and exclusion when it happens.
Yes, it needs accountability built into the system.
So this deep dive really shows how our fascination with certain animals isn't just innocent curiosity. It's actively shaping the scientific landscape, creating these powerful, resource-heavy fields.
But fields that are being actively monopolized.
Right. And contributing directly to excluding people based on their gender, their race, their career stage, undermining that ideal of unbiased science.
Which leaves us, and you the listener, with a really important question to think about. If this race for prestige, fueled by the charisma of the animals we study, keeps pushing out talented, diverse voices, especially younger scientists or those from less privileged backgrounds, how much progress are we actually losing? How far will we fall short of creating that truly unrestricted and unbiased research environment that we absolutely need to solve massive global problems like biodiversity loss?